certainty is something that a W-2 job gives. Entrepreneurship is the exact opposite. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. I'm going to tell you step by step how you can leave your 9 to 5, and none of it will be theory. I'm going to tell you exactly what I did in order to leave my 9 to 5. And why should you listen to anything I say? Well, that's exactly what I did. I spent 13 and a half years at a Fortune 30 company. I was making multiple six figures for multiple years in a row. And I left entirely for a new industry, doing nothing remotely close to what I was doing. I was in the retail industry. Now I'm in the real estate industry. And now I'm in my fourth year full time. Last year I did 40 real estate deals. And I just recently closed a deal where I made more than 150% of what I made an entire year the year prior I left my W-2 job. And I already shared that I was making multiple six figures, so you do the math. So here is what I'm going to walk you through. Step 1 is going to be to plan your exit. Step 2 is going to be your actual exit. And step 3 is your post-exit, and I'm going to call / going all in. And why I think that we need to talk about your post-exit / going all in as part of the how to leave your 9 to 5, because I think it's important that you have mental clarity on expectations of what it takes, because I can share what it takes because I've done it. So those are the 3 steps that we're going to cover, and let's rock and roll. So first, planning your exit. One of the very first things that I did is I got very clear on what it is that I want and why do I want it. And I don't just mean from a career standpoint. I mean in all categories of my life. Back in 2018, I was very happy with the money that I was making. I was relatively happy with the progression of my professional career, but something felt off. And I knew that I wanted more, but I didn't know what it was and I didn't know how to go get it. And so I ended up hiring a coach. And I hired this coach in 2019. And one of the first things that this coach helped me with was to identify very clearly what I wanted in all the categories of my life. So that could include a number of different things for a lot of different people. What it included for me was what I wanted in my physical and mental, personal life, how to keep my physical and mental strength at peak state, what I wanted from a family and relationship standpoint. And obviously the most important relationships to me are the relationship with my spouse and I, and the relationship with my kids. And then separately was every other relationship, every other close relationship that's in my life. Next was my financial / career category of my life and what I wanted there. And next, what I wanted from what was I passionate about? What did I naturally draw to, naturally magnetize to, and how do I continue to move towards that in my life? And it was very, very helpful and powerful for me. And it took a very long time, at least I think, because I didn't learn this or start to do this until I was in my mid-30s. And so if you are earlier in your life and you have the ability to get that clarity sooner, then I think that would substantially help. But when I hired this coach and she helped me do that, it was extremely helpful. It significantly altered the way that I thought about things. It helped transform my future behaviors and what I would consistently take action on. And in the context of this episode, her and I came up with a plan in 2019 that I was ultimately going to leave my career. And I started talking to her well over a year before I actually left. So it took us a while to put this plan in place, but we put it in place, and I ended up leaving in the latter half of 2020. But that first step was crucially important. And when we decided in 2019 that I was going to leave, it was helpful because my mind was already made up and I knew what I was progressing towards. I knew every single step that I was taking was moving in a certain direction, And that direction was not trying to progress further in my current job that was a big shift for me because the entire previous decade of my professional career was all about trying to progress to the next role. So that was a definite shift in mindset for me. But for you, if you're in your 9 to 5 and you don't have crystal clarity on what it is that you want, all the categories of your life and why you want those things, then I think that's a good step. And if you need help with that, like I did, I would encourage you you could Google a coach that can help you. Reach out to me. I'm happy to give you a suggestion. I personally used a Tony Robbins coach. I think there could be a lot of people that could be appropriate for you. Use whoever you want. It was helpful for me to have one. Do I think you should have one? I don't think you should do anything, but it helped me. So that's what I did. The second thing that was helpful for me, and we're still in the plan your exit stage here, is once I got clarity on what it is that I wanted and why through the help of my coach, and I ultimately made the decision to leave, I talked to her every 2 weeks. And this was helpful because she helped make sure she was an extra set of eyes for me. And you may not need this. It was very helpful for me in the time. But every 2 weeks, we would talk about every single one of those categories of my life and the progression and the steps that I was taking towards each outcome within those categories. And that was helpful. And I don't typically need a lot of inner motivation or somebody else to motivate me, because once I have clarity on what it is that I want, I am historically and typically pretty good at staying disciplined to do those things. And so it wasn't necessarily the motivation that she helped me with. And I do think I would have consistently maintained the level of discipline even without her. But what was helpful is every 2 weeks, we had to talk about what it was that I was doing. And she was just an extra set of eyes and accountability for me. And so that was the second thing. If you are thinking about leaving your 9 to 5 and you know that it would be helpful for someone to be there along your journey to talk to every 2 weeks, because for me, think about this. I was continuously trapped by getting thrown more and more money at this company. And it was great. My experiences were great. I learned a ton, but I had thought about leaving numerous times throughout my career. And just the easier and the more comfortable and the safer thing to do was to not do that because I was getting paid well. So even the thought of doing so was scary, but having someone that I knew I had to show up for and talk about every 2 weeks, I do think for me that was one thing that helped not remove the fear that was there, but rather confront it, because she would expose any sort of fear that I had based on my language, based on what I told her, and we would address it directly. And that was very helpful for me in the time. The third thing is just getting clear on what it is that you'll do and why. When I say what it is that you'll do, if you're going to leave your 9 to 5, obviously you need some sort of business. And so getting clear on what that business is and why you're going to pick that business, I think could be helpful. And for me, I share this as a step because this is actually not something that I had super clarity on. I knew that I had some interest in real estate, but I didn't know exactly which direction that I was going to go. So I mentioned that as a step because I do think that if I had that clarity in that direction, that I could have been even further ahead by the time that I left. So that's the reason for me including that, even though that's not specifically what I did. But obviously getting clear, if you're going to leave your 9 to 5, you need to have clarity around which avenue you're going to use to support your family. The next thing in the plan your exit stage, so we're still in the first step, which is plan your exit. Number 4 here within plan your exit is build your financial threshold. So define your financial threshold and then build to whatever your financial threshold is. And so for me, my financial threshold was at least 2 years of living expenses in the bank liquid. And then this wasn't necessarily a requirement, but this was the case for me, is non-liquid assets I had well over 2 years. And so I knew that if I had the ability to take some risk because I had at least 2 years of living expenses liquid, and I had well over that in non-liquid if that was something that I needed to cash in on. And that was very helpful. And so for you, it could be something that looks like that, or your financial threshold could simply be building your whatever your side thing is, whatever you've defined of what you're going to do, and your income is replaced by your side thing. I think that is probably a little bit safer of an option, and maybe an option that if I were to do this all over again, I would probably lean a little bit more towards that option versus the one that I chose. Because if you do jump ship, even if you have a couple years of income, if that income is not replaced quickly, and that can be difficult. I was a high income earner, at least in comparison to the rest of people my age. If that income is not replaced, then your net worth is going to be subtracted, and maybe that's not important to you. Those are the two different options, is to define what your financial threshold is that you just want to make a monthly amount from your side thing that can replace your income, or if it's not replacing your income, define what that monthly amount is and then just go make it and then leave. Or what would be a reasonable amount of money that you would want to have in your bank account liquid, and what is also as a backup a reasonable amount of money that you have access to that is not liquid if you need to liquidate it. And so that threshold might look a little bit different for everyone. What was helpful for me is just 2 years. And I would suggest at least a year. Some people might have a threshold for more risk than others. But depending on where you are in your life, I had 2 kids already at that point, which again, some would consider a significant risk, but define what it is that your threshold is, and then go achieve your threshold and put in a plan to achieve whatever that threshold is. And then the last step of the first piece here, which is plan your exit, the 5th part of plan your exit, and this is more of a mental conditioning, but be willing to have significantly lower status for an extended period of time. And this wasn't necessarily something that I conditioned myself to believe before I left. I share it because after the fact, it was something that I simply did. And I think you knowing it, if you want to leave your 9 to 5, just knowing it ahead of time and being, not only knowing it, but being willing to confront it. I do think that's why most people aren't willing to leave their 9 to 5, is because that can be difficult to give up status. If you're making very, very good money at your 9 to 5 and then you stop doing that and you start something new, and the something new makes you no money, well, that's going to affect how you live your life. And some people can't deal with that. Some people, that's very difficult, and that's the reason why they'll stay in their 9 to 5, and that could be perfectly fine. I will say, if you are miserable in your 9 to 5, don't let the idea of a lower status keep you from doing something that you may be in love with, because in all reality, we're all going to be dead soon. And the one thing I've realized I'm most fearful of is when I'm however old, 85 years old, look back and have regrets about what it is that I could have or should have or wish that I would have done this and that I didn't do because the opinions of others around me were more in control of my future behaviors than what it is that I actually wanted. So just don't let that be you if that's the case. All right, we are going to move we've covered everything from a plan your exit standpoint. So we've gone step by step. You have gotten clear on what you want and why. You have an accountability partner that you can show up to and talk to regularly. You're clear on what your business model is, how you're going to make money. You've defined what your financial threshold is, and you've built a plan to get there. And you're willing to have significantly lower status for an extended period of time. You're ready to rock and roll. Now it's time to put that exit into practice. So step 2 is your actual exit. And the first part of this, no matter what, at least for me, is and was the scariest part. There's no easy way around this. Everyone I've talked to that was in a similar scenario as me, which there aren't that many people. I think what I did was kind of crazy. But everyone that has left has been very scared. It's scary. I don't care what people say. Everyone that does it is scared out of their mind. And the people who actually take the action, it's not that they aren't scared. It's just that they push through the fear of the uncertainty. The second part of your exit is the mental strength that you will need to bear the next 6, 12, 24, 36 months, whatever time period, or the infinite time period, just because being an entrepreneur is difficult. And I list mental preparation in a step under the exit category and not under the plan your exit category, because I don't think this is a prerequisite in order to exit. But now that you are exiting, you need to be prepared. In other words, I don't think you need to do this in order to exit, but once you have exited, this is very difficult. And here's what I mean. Being an entrepreneur is very different than being a W-2 employee. And I think one of the biggest things, or one of the biggest challenges that you're going to face, is doing work over and over and over for an extended period of time without seeing an outcome. And the people who do that most, or the people who are best at doing something for an extended period of time without seeing an outcome, seem to be the people who succeed the most. And that's difficult because when you are a W-2 employee, if you do something well, every step along the way, you're getting rewarded for that. That can be verbal recognition, written recognition, promotions, bonuses, pay increases. They can look very different. But as an entrepreneur, you have none of those things because your priority is serving your customers, and it might take you a long time to figure out how to serve them in a way where they keep coming back to you, or in a way that you can continue to repeat that action over and over. And so you might not see an outcome for a very long time. And so mentally preparing yourself that you are in this no matter what, and you're going to do it for a very extended period of time, even if you don't see an outcome, is an important mental side of this. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. The third part of your exit, and this was, I'll call this the physical prep, or getting your key stakeholders to buy in. And again, you could, obviously it's important before you leave that your key stakeholders are bought in. But once you've exited, this is exponentially important, because the people who you are around the most are going to influence your behavior, and which therefore are going to have influence over your actions, which will have influence over your outcomes. And who I would define as a key stakeholder is my wife, right? So it was extremely important that my wife and I were on the same page about my exit. And we had lots of conversation about, hey, I have no idea what this is going to look like. I think it's important that I have support. What do you want from me? Like, how can I make sure I serve you best as a husband? I serve our kids best as a father. And what was great about my wife, and this is one of the staples of her character, is my wife is very much a ride or die. She told me, I don't care what happens. If we're going to be homeless together, we'll be homeless together. I believe in you. She was not putting pressure on me at all to, she wasn't inputting fear into me. And I think that's important because I do think a lot of people have spouses who have their own fear about that type of situation and may not feel as comfortable if their spouse cuts off all their income. And by the way, I was making, 90 to 95% of our income. And so when you just cut that off, obviously that can be pretty scary. And so if you are in that position, making sure that you have a partner, if you're single, I guess that's a little bit easier. But even if you're single, if you're not married and you have a girlfriend, or if you have a roommate even, that's why I said key stakeholder and not simply spouse, because the person who is a key stakeholder in your life has influence over what it is that you do. And it's important that everyone is in support of your vision no matter what. And if it wasn't for my wife, honestly, at some point I may have just called it quits and gone back to a more stable paying job. And I'm very grateful that that is not part of her character. And it's because of her that I am where I am today. So as part of your exit, getting your key stakeholders on board is super important. So you've done it. You've left. You have planned your exit successfully. You've executed your exit. You're mentally prepared for what's ahead. And so are your key stakeholders. Now, I'm including this post-exit. I'm calling step 3 the post-exit / going all in. Because again, I know I said this earlier, but I think why it's important for you to understand this step before you leave is because it can just help even more put you in the right frame of mind to do what is going to be needed of you in the near and the distant future. So as part of your post-exit / going all in, the first thing you're going to do, and I talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to make it its own little step, is because I think it's that important, and I'm calling it embrace uncertainty. And if you've been at a 9 to 5 for many, many years, or you've climbed a corporate ladder, you have been rewarded over and over, year after year, you've been rewarded by certainty. You know precisely how much you're going to get paid each week. You know exactly what it is that you need to do to get promoted. You know exactly what your day is going to look like. Certainty is something that a W-2 job gives. And entrepreneurship is the exact opposite. And I think that's why it seems rare that people who are W-2 employees for a very long time, that's one big reason why I think most of them do not go jump ship and be an entrepreneur. That and status, but we've talked about that a little bit. But shifting from certainty to uncertainty is very difficult, and it's something that I think is important as part of your going all in strategy, that you commit to and embrace this uncertainty, because it can be very uncomfortable to deal with that, especially at first, especially after you've been rewarded with so much certainty over and over and over again. But it's something that, at least if you are aware of when it comes, you don't need to let it dictate your future behavior. You can just be aware of it, and then you could still do the things that you need to do in order to advance your business. And I think that's an important step. The second part of the post-exit / going all in is realizing that entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is the single greatest personal growth hack that exists. Entrepreneurship is the single greatest personal growth hack that exists. And I say this because your business is going to be a ceiling of who its leaders are. And when you first start your business, you are the leader, and your business will not grow beyond your capabilities unless you bring someone that has more capabilities than you do into your business, which at the beginning is not really realistic unless you just get lucky and start it with a really smart partner who has something that you don't. But entrepreneurship is the single greatest personal growth hack, because if you want your business to grow, then that means that you have to grow. And if your business is not growing, that could be because you need to grow. And if you don't grow, then your business won't grow. And I think why there is a statistic out there that the majority of small businesses fail, I honestly think a big part of that reason, other than some of the macroeconomic stuff that might be out of people's control, but I think a big part of that statistic is people don't realize that their business, there is a ceiling of where their business is going to go based on how good that they are as the owner and the leader of that business. And so what I have found is that if you want to grow tremendously and make yourself very uncomfortable, start a business. Because if your back's against the wall and it's either the business dies or you grow, well, you can make a choice. And I think a lot of people make the choice that the business dies. But if you don't want that to happen, then you have to grow. And so part of this step of the post-exit / going all in is just realizing that the outcome of what you're doing now is the person that you are going to become in this process. The outcome that you're after is not a revenue target. It's not a profit target. It's not to make a certain amount of money. It's not for any sort of freedom that you are going to achieve. Those are all results of what are going to naturally happen by running a successful business. But once you realize that the actual thing that matters is who you become in this process, then it gives you permission to continue to grow and to make your attention and your focus on you continuing to grow. Because you know if you don't, then at some point your business is going to hit a ceiling and it's going to fail. The third part of this post-exit / going all in, you have to realize that you cannot use your business to solve your personal problems. And your personal problems might look like having a certain amount of income each month, feeling significant, and posting all over social media that you left your job and, oh, I'm an entrepreneur now, and posting all the highlights when you're actually not making any money or you're losing money, but you post highlights to feel significant. You cannot use your business to solve the problems that you personally have. And once you realize that your business's job is to solve your customers' problems, and that's where your focus goes, then you can continue to get better and you can continue to improve in your ability to solve your customers' problems, which is going to make your business better. And if your focus remains on improving your ability to solve your customers' problems, then your probability of having a business that's going to be around for a long time is much greater. What I see a lot of entrepreneurs do is they start a business, but they use the business to feed their own personal needs. And I think that's a reasonable, like, we would say that and we would say, oh yeah, I could see how that would happen. But it's important to delineate between the different purposes of a business, and that you are very, very conscious that you're not trying to get your business to solve your personal problems, and that you are laser focused on what are the problems of my customer, how can I solve them, and how can I move to solve them more quickly with less friction, and how can I make their experience the best possible experience that they can go through. And that might mean if your focus is 1000% on the customer, that might take a really long time to, one, figure out, and two, execute on. And again, that means that you have to continue doing things without seeing any sort of expectation of any sort of outcome. And that's why it's so important to have that mindset, because otherwise you're going to fall into the trap of, oh, well, I got a $3,500 mortgage, and because I have a $3,500 mortgage, I need to make sure that I can pay my bills this month. And so I'm going to go do this thing, and my focus is just going to be on generating some short-term income so I can survive and, make sure I can make my $3,500 mortgage payment and my $1,000 car payment, right? If you have those types of problems, it's not your business's job to solve those problems. It's your job. You got to go figure that out. So don't use your business to solve your personal problems. Use your business to solve your customers' problems, and your business is going to have more longevity. The fourth part of your post-exit / going all in, it may be of no surprise to you that if we're talking about working and working and working without expectation of result, you might not make any sort of good money for a long time. And in fact, if you come from a 9-to-5, you might not make nearly as much as you are used to making. And in order to not let that disrupt the sustainability of you continuing to run a business, you have to cut your personal expenses. And so this was number 4 for me in the post-exit / going all in. Cut your personal expenses. Number 1, it's good to practice this anyways, so that you get yourself out of this, I can have whatever I want when I want it, because when you make a certain amount of money, that's essentially where you're at. And there's a lot of good benefits to just seeing how tight you can cut your personal expenses, because then you realize how much money you're spending on things that you don't actually need. But you're going to benefit the most now as an entrepreneur from needing to live on as little as possible, because then you are setting yourself up more to not have to require your business to solve your personal problems. Then you can just focus on your clients' problems. And if the amount that you're having to pay yourself each month is significantly lower, then that's just going to make things a lot less stressful. It's going to be less stressful on your personal relationship. It's going to be less stressful on your business. It's going to be less stress that you're putting on yourself, because you have this weight off of your shoulders, that you don't have all of these super high costs that you need to fulfill each month. And I did this as simple. My wife and I talked about this. We used this crazy piece of technology, and it was called a Google Sheet, by the way. And this crazy piece of technology called a Google Sheet enabled us to reduce our spending by 30% just by doing this one thing. And that one thing is all we tracked is how much did we spend this year versus how much we spend in the same month last year. And we made it a game. And so I had in one column of the spreadsheet what I spent in that month last year. I had in the next column what we spent in this month this year. And then we just wanted to see how big of a difference could we make it. And we made it a fun game, and we ended up spending 30% less the following year after we made this game. So just tracking it and doing something as simple as making a Google Sheet, that's at least what worked for us. You can do whatever you want. You probably have much better ideas that are a lot more sophisticated, maybe. But us doing that was super, super simple. And then if you want to take it even further, the following year, we actually started to track what we're spending every single month, and like super, super detailed, and we're able to cut it even more. But cutting your personal expenses, stop spending money on stupid shit, and seeing how lean you can live is going to be helpful, because then, again, you're not going to need your business to solve your personal problems. And then the fifth and the last part of the post-exit / going all in is, and this is going to be business and tactical related, but figuring out what your current constraint is in your business, ruthlessly attacking it with a significant, consistent effort, and then figuring out what the next constraint is, and then repeating that process. Every step along the way, there is going to be a constraint that's right in front of you that's preventing you or your business from growing. And you figuring out what that constraint is and then taking violent action against that constraint is what is going to release that constraint and enable the next constraint to present its ugly head, so that you can then take your sword into the castle and you can slay the next constraint dragon that is going to be in front of you. But again, I will repeat this notion of you must be willing to work for extended periods of time without an outcome, because that could take a long time to figure out what the constraint is, to then go figure it out, then figure out what the next constraint is. And I think what's cool and funny about business, I'm in my 4th year, and that's what I'm still doing, right? And I know I will be doing that for an infinite amount of time, because that is the game of business. And the game of business is to just keep playing the game, right? My goal is just keep playing the game. There's no winner, there's no loser in business. I'm just going to continue to play, and that's how you define winning in business, that you can continue playing. And so figuring out what that current constraint is, ruthlessly attacking it, and then figuring out what the next constraint is crucial. And what's unique about that, it may be a constraint that's in your business. It may be a skill constraint that you personally have. It may be a character constraint that you personally have. It may be a belief constraint that you currently have. And that's the hardest thing to deduce, is what do I not know that I should know? And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so it takes a lot of effort to figure out exactly what your constraint is, because it may be a constraint in your business, but it could also be a constraint with you as an individual. And in most cases, it is a constraint with you as an individual, and you got to figure that out. Go change your beliefs, go up your skills, go mold your character, and become a person who can then remove the constraints that are within your business. So it's kind of a double piece there, right? Constraints of you personally and constraints of your business. So that's it. Those are my outline steps of planning your exit, your actual exit, and the post-exit / going all in. Those are all of the things that I have done that have helped me. That's exactly step by step what I did in order to leave. And those are some of the things that once I left that I focused on, so that I can continue to have longevity and so that I could keep going. And I think once you have done those 3 things, then you talk about just getting into stability in business, if that word even exists. But we'll talk about that in another episode. But I hope that was helpful. If this was helpful, if you could send this to somebody who, if you know someone who is in a 9 to 5 and they want to leave to start their own business, or they want to start their own business and then eventually leave, and you think this would help them, it would mean a lot to me if you share it with them. And if not, that's cool too. But really, really appreciate your attention on this one. Thank you for listening. I hope it was helpful to kind of hear some of the things that I've done and what my mindset has been in order to achieve those things and what I've learned. So thank you guys. I love you guys. And until the next one, I'll see you. Peace.